But she's here tonight to talk about one of Gulf Breeze's famous families. And so you'll get to know her through this whole presentation. But Teresa, thank you so much, and I'm going to give you the microphone.
Thank
Give
you.
her a round for her. Thank you for your patience.
This thing will stay on. I about have it memorized.
I was going to say, once you start, you won't.
Oh, I didn't write it. It was. Let me go back one more time. Dave, could you take a picture of it and let me use your phone? Sorry, Mr. Vance.
You want me to take a picture of it with my phone, Teresa?
Sure. Try again. Well, here we go.
Okay.
Now, we're starting at ground zero, everybody, because I want to tell you something. Once upon a time, in 1938, 53 years ago, a mother and her 6 daughters lived in one room in the Lear house. It was the middle room on the east side of the house with 2 windows. Mother was Iris, and the girls were Winnie, Virginia, Betty Ann, I'm going to start crying, Betty Ann, Isabel, Bobby, and Frances.
Nancy.
Iris ran away from her husband in Georgia and brought the girls to Florida to live. The father was seeing another woman, and Iris would not tolerate the behavior. That was in 1934. So Iris was a well-educated woman. She could write well. She was a pianist, a clothes designer, a seamstress. She did all kinds of handwork, crochet, knitting, crewel, needlepoint, and tatting, and she was an excellent cook. So she had cancer and was bedridden at this time. They all cooked, ate, slept, and studied in this one room. It was a depression and times were difficult. Winnie and Virginia had to go to work to support the family. Iris was given 12 radium treatments instead of the regular 7 that they usually was the minimum because the doctors didn't give her any chance of living anyways. Her weight had gone down to 90 pounds. The doctors at Sacred Heart Hospital, Dr. Anderson, Hoffman, and McGuire, told Winnie, who was the oldest, 20 years old, that their mother was not expected to live and to get in touch with her father to come and get the children. One Sunday morning, Iris sent all the girls to Sunday school at the First Baptist Church on North Halifax Street, as she did every Sunday. On this one particular Sunday morning, when the girls came home, their mother was up and had cooked dinner. She was cured of the cancer and lived until 1970. She lived to raise all her children and to see all 21 of her grandchildren. Times were hard, but we were a happy family. I'm crying. And there was much love among us, and there still is. Well, the room had 3 double beds, a kerosene stove with an oven, a table with 7 chairs, and a sink and an armoire. The 6 daughters always thought it was a miracle that happened to their mother in that room, and so did many other people, including her doctors, the nurse, Mrs. Benson, and our landlady, Alma Flint. And that's signed BACJ, Gulf Breeze, Florida, September 18, 1991. So, BACJ, that's Betty Ann Copeland Johnson. Born March 3rd, 1924 in Columbus, Georgia, to Iris Brady and William Glenn Copeland. Her mother, who ended up living almost 72 years, was from Gadsden, Alabama, and supposedly had a sister named Grace. Well, Patricia Pitty Pat Pfeiffer, the daughter of Betty Ann's second older sister, I hope I get all this right, y'all, claims that her mother, Ethel Virginia, Gina, my great aunt Gina Pfeiffer, told her so, but there's no written record of her yet to be found. So Betty Ann's father was from Coweta County, Georgia. Y'all ever seen a cow eat a cow? You go on up to Coweta County, you see a whole bunch of them. A cow eat a cow in Coweta County, Georgia. It's an old joke. My grandpa used to say. Anyway, his father was Levi John Robert Copeland, who in 1880 married Lynette Elizabeth Walker in Gadsden. The 6 sisters, who by the way were originally 7, but Iris, the twin of Isabel, died at about 8 months old. They called their paternal grandma Granny Betty. She churned butter, and she chewed tobacco, and she spit. They also had on their father's side an Uncle Moses and an Aunt Ora, and she lived to be 100 years and 3 months. She wrote a song for the youngest sister, Frances Rebecca, who went by Frances, to sing about sending something about a dozen chickens and some feed to her brother-in-law, George Pfeiffer, who was the husband of Virginia. Anyway, later on, the children of the 6 sisters, they dubbed William Glenn Pitpaw. His Brunswick stew recipe is stayed in this family, even though he didn't, and is still made to this day by some Copeland kinfolk somewhere around here. And the old Lear house was renovated in 1991 by PHS students working with the Historic Pensacola Preservation Board. Now, Betty Ann, by way of her lineage, had the credentials to join the DAR, which is the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Colonial Dames were of the 13 original states, and the CDA, the Confederate Daughters of America. Miss Mary Emma Terrell, I keep pointing, was a sister to her maternal grandmother Hattie Terrell, born in 1880 at Ball Ground, Georgia, who was married to Carl Brady of Jasper, Georgia, who died in Gadsden. Y'all get this, how my family is. So this is all Betty Ann's fault, because she kept all these records. So Mary Emma and her sisters, Gertie, Winnie, and Mary Emma and her sisters, Gertie and Winnie, are Betty Ann's aunts, and they all 3 joined the Joseph Habersham chapter of the DAR up there in Atlanta. Then my great aunt Betty wrote to me, and it was on the copy of that DAR document. She said, quote, "I have never joined a chapter. If you ever decide to join, I will help you with the paperwork, for there is a lot to prove you are entitled." Simon Terrell, who was born in 1755 in North Carolina, was a lieutenant in the American Revolutionary War. You have many distant cousins who fought at Kings Mountain. You also have many relatives who fought in the Civil War, 1861. Hope this helps a little to explain. Love you, Aunt Betty. Okay. It always amazed me how much she knew about our ancestors. I mean, like off the top of her head. And how she knew the difference between like second cousins and first cousins twice and once removed and all that such things. And she kept handwritten records of our pedigree charts long before those .com sites came out on the internet, you know. From her records in 1971, she had traced our ancestors to as far back as Sir Dothius. I'm not sure because it was handwritten, so I can't tell what the spelling was. And the last name, Tyrrell, Tyrell, who was a close kinsman to William I, King of England, with whom he served at the Battle of Hastings in 1066. That's how far back she had gone. Granny Betty's father, Betty Ann's great-grandfather, James W. Walker, he was a private sergeant in the Confederate Georgia Infantry. He was captured at Cumberland Gap in September of 1863 and died exactly 1 month later. Then in the early 1900s, yet another relative, Atlanta attorney William H. Terrell, now it's been changed by this time to Terrell, which is my grandma's middle name. Anyway, conceived the idea for carving the Confederate Memorial in Stone Mountain, Georgia, like 16 miles east of Atlanta. So she got some kind of historic people in the family. I tell you, Betty Ann Johnson, she was an excellent historian and wordsmith, and she collected photos to go along with her stories. She wrote one book called My Scrapbook Memory of Gulf Breeze, Florida in 1992, the cover of which was illustrated by her nephew Bruce Taylor, who's the son of her first younger sister, Isabel Taylor Wasson, who went by Izzy, and whose second husband, Clint, flew a P-38 Lightning fighter for the Army. He was a base commander at Eglin before he went to Alaska and then settled in Minnesota with Izzy. Betty dedicated an entire section at the end of that book, about that thick, to the Johnson family. She was so very much family-oriented. Then she co-authored a second book published in 2002. That's the Remember When, Volume 3, a pictorial journey of Gulf Breeze with her daughters and granddaughters helping out. Then the dedication reads, to all who love Gulf Breeze, and to Betty Ann Ellis, Nancy Dow Johnson, Tanya D. Rainsford, beloved daughters of Betty Ann Copeland Johnson, March 3rd, 1924 through December 27th, 2001. And it was due in great part to those two publications that I learned how my own cherished memories of wonderful times spent down at the Driftwood Cottage, their home, and growing up Gulf Breeze even came to be possible. Okay, and then here is the foreword. She was such a great writer that I just, if y'all don't mind just reading what she wrote, her writings at. She says, I came to Gulf Breeze as a young bride with my husband Arthur in 1949. We lived at Driftwood, his parents' summer beach cottage at Butcher Pin Cove on Pensacola Bay. Some of our friends thought we were crazy to live on the beach year-round. Gulf Breeze was mostly a summer retreat with a few permanent residents. Through the years, Arthur's work took him out of town many times, and most of the time the family would go with him. We kept the house and would come back to Driftwood for our vacations. We have 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren, so when Arthur retired, we moved back to Driftwood, enjoying one long, grand vacation with our family. Sitting in the swing on the cliff, 22 feet above sea level, overlooking Pensacola Bay, I look out over the water and up into the sky and remember Gulf Breeze in 1949. Pensacola Bay was full of fish. Trout, mullet, mackerel, redfish, alewives, grouper, red snapper, eel, flounder, stingrays, ling, spadefish, hardtail, saltwater catfish, and sturgeon, with dolphins rolling up and down in the water every day. There were horseshoe crabs, stone crabs, oysters, clams, scallops, and blue crabs. The blue crabs were so plentiful and close to shore you could walk along the beach and scoop them up with a crab net, catch enough for a meal in 30 minutes. That's the truth, because we done it, didn't we? Anyway, she says, walking along the beach was a wonderful experience. The sand was so white and clean, and you could see periwinkle snails crawling along, leaving the mark with a silver trail. The water was clean and pleasant to swim in with the children. The skies were always spotted with birds, seagulls, pelicans, coots, sandpipers, martins, skimmers, egrets, blue herons, dove, mockingbird, blue jays, orioles, cardinals, brown thrush, red-tailed hawks, buzzards, finches, titmouse, wild ducks, Canadian geese, kingfishers, cowbirds, owls, sparrows, quail, and a few eagles. She said there were 2 huge eagles' nests in Gulf Breeze, one at Deer Point and the other one east of Tiger Point on Santa Rosa Sound. Animals ran loose on the peninsula. Several times a week, large black and white hogs, wild boar, and domestic cows would come down from the beach, from the east end of the peninsula, and come up the cliff into our yard. We also had snakes, raccoons, opossum, foxes, bobcats, and flying squirrels. On May 4th, 1933, Arthur's parents bought Lot 1 in the Duncan subdivision from Mary Ann McLaren? M-C-E-L-H-E-R-A-N, Duncan, Mary Ann Duncan, who at the time still owned most of the western end of the peninsula. Arthur Dow Johnson Sr., who worked for the Pensacola Bridge Corporation as a toll operator, saw a house that had originally stood in the right-of-way approach to the Pensacola Bay Bridge, but it had been moved to one side in order to build Highway 98. Upon inquiring about it, Mr. Johnson was told that the house had originally belonged to Captain George Addison Duncan Sr. And his wife Mary Ann McLaren Duncan, It had been built for the Duncans in 1900 by Frank McKay and had been used as a schoolhouse for a few years. On October 2nd, 1928, Mary Ann Duncan sold the property to Captain James E. Pryor and his wife Ruth Williams Pryor, who had lived there about 8 years before the date of the deed. The Pryors sold the land and the house to the Pensacola Bridge Corporation on August 30th, 1930. The Johnsons paid $25 for the house to the Pensacola Bridge Corporation on May 17, 1933. The receipt, which we still have, was signed by E.L. Boniface Sr., who also worked for the Bridge Corporation. The house was rolled on logs and pulled by a winch on a truck to its present site at 100 Duncan Avenue. Tennessee Clark, who lived back in the woods in Gulf Breeze, did this work with the help of Mr. Johnson and his two sons, Arthur Jr. and Burke. Trees, mostly blackjacks or scrub oaks, had to be cut to make a path to pull the house along Duncan Avenue. When the men got the house to the site, they shot the property line with a rifle for a straight line. Apparently this age-old method did not work, for the house is not straight on the property line. Or they might have had, well, never mind, I won't go there. Our home, Driftwood Cottage, is on Duncan Avenue, which in 1949 was a simple clay road. Heavily wooded areas with thick underbrush surrounded us. One morning I saw 15 quail walking in a row up the clay road and into the woods next to our home. It was a beautiful sight, and I have never seen that many quail since. In the early evening and early morning, one could always hear them call, "Bob White." There is no sound more beautiful, and I miss them very much. Arthur told me when he was young, the family would come over to Driftwood Cottage from Pensacola for the summer. They called it going camping. The boys had a wonderful time playing on the beach and in the water, but they also had a chore. The chore was to fill two 55-gallon wooden barrels with water so the family could have running water in the house. The barrels were high up on the side of the house and had to be filled from a shallow well on the property. Using only a hand pump, it took Arthur and his brother 2 or 3 hours to fill the barrels, and the hand pump is still here, but it no longer works. I know where it is now. Arthur's mother told me about Driftwood Cottage, which was interesting to me because of its French Creole style. The cottage had 2 large rooms, each 18 feet square, with a screened-in porch on the north side overlooking the bay. The only bath was on the west end of the porch. It wasn't in the house. Before electricity came to Driftwood Cottage, the family had to use oil lamps, one of which we still have. Later, the house had electricity, but in order to have running water, we had to put in our own well, which was operated by an electric pump. If you wanted telephone service, you had to be on the line with 9 other customers. The house was in the shape of a T with 4 large rooms, each being 18 by 18 feet. The house was divided before arriving at its final resting place. The Johnsons took 2 rooms for themselves and gave the other 2 rooms to Mr. Johnson's aunt, Miss Eunice Huey. Mrs. Huey placed her half of the house on the land she owned across the road from the Johnsons on Duncan Avenue at Live Oak Street. Live Oak Street, the road from Highway 98 to Duncan Avenue, was built by the Johnsons. They laid cinders from the Louisville and Nashville Railroad tracks in Pensacola and cotton waste from a cotton gin on Fairfield Drive in the middle of the road, then placed dirt on top of that. On several occasions, the road was known to catch a fire when cigarettes was tossed in the street. So we were members of St. Anne's Catholic Church, which was for many years the only house of worship in Gulf Breeze. We were active with the church and the congregation, hosting Bible studies in our home each week. Once a year, we'd have a church festival, and every Easter, we'd have an Easter egg hunt for the children. Several of the Easter egg hunts were in our yard, and our next-door neighbors' yards, the Capieros and O'Learys. Early in the 1950s, Arthur's friends Bill and Ruth Cook came to visit us. We invited them in and sat in the kitchen having coffee. After having been in the house for a while, Ruth Cook told me that she had the strangest feeling that she had been in this house before, even though she knew she had never come to visit us. She told me that when she was a little girl, she had lived with her parents, James and Ruth, prior in Gulf Breeze before the Pensacola Bay Bridge was built. Being rather surprised myself, I said to her, "Welcome home." I explained to her that the house was the very one in which she had lived. She could hardly believe it. She and her family had always thought their old house had been torn down. I met Ruth Clark Pryor Cook for the second time in 1970. She was going to see her father, Captain James E. Pryor, on his 76th birthday. He was living on 9th Street in St. Andrew, Florida. I asked her to find out any information he could remember about the house in Gulf Breeze. He confirmed the information we had been given regarding the origin of the house and its subsequent move to its present location. In 1928, the Gulf Breeze population was 10 people living in 5 homes. By 1949, the population reached about 50 people. There were 15 permanent residence homes and 40 summer homes owned by Pensacola residents who come over in the summertime to enjoy the Gulf Breeze beaches, where temperatures were on average about 6 to 8 degrees cooler. Population of Gulf Breeze today, and she wrote this, has grown to 6,500 people with several thousand homes. Gulf Breeze was a quiet and peaceful little village where most of the inhabitants knew each other. In the summertime, relatives and friends would come over and enjoy the beach with us. Good food and plenty of fun was had by all. We had crab, gumbo dinners, fish fries, and watermelon cuttings. We would swim, ski, and go boat riding. We had a float that we'd pull far out into the water for the children to use for diving. The shallow water stretched about 700 feet out into the bay. Driftwood Cottage still holds much charm and love for me. Arthur and I raised 3 daughters there. Betty Ann Johnson Ellis, Nancy Dow, Johnson Jackson, and Tiny D. Johnson Rainsford. They were all born in Old Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola at 12th Avenue. There we go, guys, 12th Avenue and Gonzales Streets. Barbara got it. Dr. Mayhew Dodson delivered them all. They too are fond of the old house, hold many happy memories, as are our grandchildren, Rachel Bonet Ellis, Tanya Janine Jackson, Robert Vance Rainsford, and Angela D. Rainsford. And 2 great-grandchildren, Caleb Forrest Broom and Naomi Cyril Powell. Well, since then, we now got us Vance Grant guests. Thank you very much. Anyway, Arthur passed away on January 6, 2000, but I'm still here at Driftwood. My family and I loved it then, and we love it still. Gulf Breeze has been a wonderful place to live and raise children with its beautiful waters, land, and sky to admire and enjoy. The tide changes and indescribable sunsets and sunrises add to her beauty. But most of all, I love Gulf Breeze for her wonderful people. I dedicate this to my husband. Thank you very much for putting up with me doing all this. I don't know how our time is, but I have this much more stuff about her that I just, this is how far I got. But there's a display board up here. It describes who everybody is, my great aunts and her pictures at the end. Wait a minute. There was one thing I wanted to read, but I didn't get that far, so unless if we're time up, probably, huh?
Yeah, we probably are. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to?
Would you send that to me?
Yes,
You did a
ma'am.
great job.
Thank
you.
you. Well, all I did was read her writing. One of my aunts, I interviewed a number of different people on the phone, relatives, friends of the family and everything, and I'll try to put that on the end of it, what everybody said. Like Daddy said, he remembered the watermelon cut. One time she had it all set up and went in the house to get something, and she come back out and all the boys had taken off with the watermelon and eating it. There's all kinds of beautiful stories about Driftwood, and anyways, wish I had more time.
Is Driftwood still there?
Where is it?
No, it's
Where was it?
it was I might get help with somebody.
Right over by Taco Bell?
It was 100 Duncan Street. It was across the street from the Benson house.
No.
Yeah,
Except down a
Oh.
little.
Yeah.
Duncan Street is what they now call
Well, I think Duncan Street turned, like when you go, past the Benson house, when you stop.
Right,
But
if you take a right.
That's Duncan Street, I think.
And it was the opposite side on the water. As a matter of fact, Mr. Britton Stamps told me one day, if I come by his house, that he knows a lady that lives on the property and would let me, he'd call her up and she would let me go down and walk on the property.
So probably when they did that whole subdivision.
Oh, yeah.
That's when they, yeah.
You did a beautiful job.
Thank you, Ms.
And I hope you're gonna preserve that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this is
I want to
wonderful.
get pictures of this, this is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Get one of Teresa with it.
You want to break the
Let's get
Hey,
you.
why don't you get your family up here too?
Here,
Have them.
look this way, darling.
Oh.
Perfect, perfect. But then
Yeah, get close.
Oh, yeah.
I think Tanya should.
I didn't tell the ghost story.
Tanya should be up there.
There's a ghost story, there's one of my great aunts.
Yeah,
Every single one of them has some ghost
Tanya?
stories.
Yes.
Things that people have
Tanya?
said about her, 'cause the way.
Tanya, we want your picture. Come on
All
over,
of
let your
you.
family.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah, I do. Oh my God, I feel like I know you. How are you? Nice to meet you. And I didn't, I'm sorry, I didn't get you with Nancy.
His name is,
She has touched me in a way that, in my heart and soul.
They're best friends.
Nancy
Me
Johnson.
too. I mean, years related, but still.
Betty Ann Copeland Johnson's daughter. Oh, I might have known.
I don't want to run over.
She's up.
Yeah, family.
I just wanted to.
Okay, let's get these.
No, go get
No.
it.
How long has it been, like 30 years?
Okay.
Here, get a picture.
All right, how about the whole family?
Everybody,
Go get up here.
Okay, get up. I got on one side.
I'm coming.
I know.
Are you not in family?
no.
Okay.
Yeah, but Holly, you come on her side.
I'm Nancy.
Nancy, come here. Okay.
I'll stand next.
And then you stand next to me.
We owe a lot to that Betty.
I have not
Oh,
seen,
yeah.
y'all have not
She
seen
was
my
the
cousins
only
in like
person
30
that I know of
years.
who has really written about the breed.
Yeah.
And when you think about what a wonderful woman she was.
Yes.
And every girl was a good label.
Betty,
Yeah, get up here.
Oh,
Get up here, Adam and Dan.
Yeah, I see her. Okay.
There we go.
Can you get in a little, whoops, I don't work back up.
Here, I'll turn this
I'll
off.
catch you, just fall back.
Smile.
Smile. Smile.
Bingo! Take it up, buddy.
Smile.
Thank you,
Okay.
Betty.
That's what we gotta do right there.
You're good.
All right.
You are so
Okay.
They get back in line.
I'll turn this way. Are we in enough?
Okay. Smile, thank you.
Thank you so much.
What a good boy.
Are you two up to no good?
No, ma'am.
You're
Good.
gonna be good, okay? Are you gonna be good with it?
All right, well, let's, yes,
I like
another
this.
round of applause for Teresa. You're wonderful.
Thank you, Teresa.
Oh, so good to see you. I couldn't believe it, I just came. Well, yes, I made it. Yes. Hi. Nice meeting you.
I know, I don't cry.
Oh, wonderful.
I don't cry now, sir.
I know, but I think you are.
I think we have to have a business.
Really? Oh, all right. I think I can do it on my own. Yes, I am. This probably.
Another chapter.
That's right, I think we need to part two.
Oh, I know. Well, I had started working on it and
This
then.
lady looks familiar.
What is your name? Yes, Trish. This is my friend Holly.
I was filling Jean Reinhold's daughter.
You probably played. Are we supposed to be standing and rapping?
UWF here?
And this was my great aunt Bobby's, ring,
Well, be safe.
but that is a Ann Tabby.
And she also made this picture hangs in my bedroom. It's made out of pieces of cloth, skin cloth, that's cut into each piece very beautifully.
Yeah, don't take it apart.
No, I just got it together. They're probably all fun. But anyways,
It was wonderful, thank you, Teresa.
Are y'all gonna leave?
yeah, you're having
Oh.
No, it's a real short. Okay. All right, well, we're gonna, that was wonderful, I'm sure we need to have part two. When we do this, yeah, 3 or 4, because the family goes back so far. Thank you for coming.
the 26th. The 26th, you're coming.
Oh, I gotta turn this thing on for the business meetings.
Oh, okay. What a rich history, and Betty's right, it's like, if Betty Ann hadn't written, that's amazing to write all that down, and you need to write a book, Betty.
Oh, I know. I have books and books started, never finished.
Yeah, I'm the same way, it's like, but when you do take the time to do it, I mean, so many people have read that book and enjoyed that book. Oh, are we